So in this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to answer your questions, how to answer your interview questions using this formula called the PAR formula, right? So it's a great way to essentially provide examples with your answers. And this is kind of the method that I use to kind of give answers, the right amount of what I would call meat, right? The right amount of substance for the answer, so that way they know my situation and how I went about solving the problem that they want to a little bit know a little bit more about, right? So this is one of my favorite techniques to answer interview questions effectively, by the way. So it has done me wonders in terms of during interviews, right? So you might be wondering, what is the PAR formula? It's essentially what PAR formula is essentially a way to answer your questions using examples, and an example essentially follow this method where you kind of talk about the problem that you experienced, right? And then you talk about the actions you took, and then you talk about the results you had, right? So I'll show you a specific example on how to answer this one. But understand that the key thing is to, when they ask questions, so they will ask questions about, like, what are your strengths? And the best way to answer your strengths is not to just say that, you're a really good communicator, you're a really good project manager. It's good to kind of give them an example, a time where you saw that skill that you had. For example, we'll take a look at the next slide actually for that. So, we have here example, right? Tell me about your time. Tell me about a time where you had to deal with a challenging customer. So here you can talk about also, what are your strengths, where you're a great problem solver. If you were to ask you, what are your top skills, you can say, you're a great problem solver, right? Or you're a great project manager, right? So one of the ways that you can answer it, right? So you can talk about the problem you had to see this, and explain that to them, right? So the interviewer will ask you, tell me about a time where you had to deal with a challenging customer, and it's like, for sure. So when I was working at my last consulting company, my client was upset about the email conversion rates of the last month, and was hearing about it from his boss. So basically, the client was not happy about the email conversions that my client was getting at that time. So, and then what we did was we essentially developed a plan to resolve the major concern of the client. And in order to do this, we created a plan to improve email engagement rates. So we set up a weekly call to measure the progress and get feedback. And then we created a list of improvements we can make after the research, and use software such as Marketo and Google Analytics to track our progress. So these are the actions that we took to make sure, and they might ask you about, okay, what are the specific actions you took, and you can talk about them, but you can talk about overall what kind of actions you did to make sure that they were happy with whatever the concern they had, right? And then you can essentially ended up by saying the client was very happy because we supported and worked together to solve the issue, and the email conversion rates gradually improved after we implemented the best practices, right? So that's kind of the way I would answer them, right? So basically, even when you get a question like, what are your strengths, you can talk about, how you're a great communicator. You can talk about a time where the company was not, the company was not communicating well, right? And what you did was essentially you created your company was not communicating well, so therefore you created essentially a WhatsApp channel, right? That was the actions, right? The problem will be that your team and you were not communicating well, so you created a specific WhatsApp channel to do specific projects in the company, right? And you can talk about, we followed up on projects here, we shared necessary documentation and with necessary resources for help team members successfully complete the projects. And then you can end it up by the results saying, the people in my team were much more happier, they were a lot more, they bonded much better, right? So and we were able to finish the project successfully as well. So it's kind of using that format is the key, right? Talk about a problem, and every time somebody asks you, even one of your weaknesses, right? You can say something like, look, one of the weaknesses that I had, one of the problems that I had, I was in my troubleshooting skills were not that good. So, and then you can talk about some of the actions you took. I took a course and I worked with my manager to get to know where I can improve, right? And what some of the things that you actually did to make yourself better. And then you can talk about the result where I dramatically increased my ability to troubleshoot. My clients were a lot more happy. My boss was praising me for the improvements that I had, and you can essentially talk about that. The key really is here to kind of answer your question using, explain a problem or a project that you were in, right? That kind of show your skill or ability very well. And then talk about some of the actions you took, some of the tools you used, some of the softwares, some of the methodologies, some of those responsibilities that you had to work on, right? And talk about that. And then finally provide a result. What was the outcome? Did you get your way, or were you not even successful? But you can say, I tried, it doesn't matter, I didn't get success right away, I kept going at it, kind of thing, right? So the idea is essentially answer your question using the problems, action, results, methodology. It will help you answer your questions a lot more easily and with a lot more substance. Okay? And I'll see you on the next video.